Hello and welcome to the dungeon. I'm your host Rob. Today I wanted to talk about the Oath of Devotion Paladin. I actually did a Paladin video a long time ago where I kind of tried to do like all the oaths in one, but honestly that video was like close to an hour long, and I just think that I'd rather do like some shorter videos covering each one in a video, and then if people are interested in one specific oath, then they can just check out that video. They don't have to try to wade through a giant hour-long video where I cover like everything when they're probably only interested in one section anyways. So I also made a couple of multi-class videos with paladins, with like paladin sorcerer and paladin warlock, and I still feel like those are some of the strongest multi-classes available, by the way, so you should check those videos out if you haven't before. But a lot of campaigns don't allow multi-classing. It is an optional rule after all. And some people just don't like to multi-class. They'd rather just be their one class, and that's their vision of their character all the way from start to end. And there's nothing wrong with that. And Paladin is an excellent, excellent base class. And I think all the O's are pretty good. In my last campaign that I ran, one of the players, Trish, played an Oath of the Ancients Paladin, and that campaign went all the way from 1 to 20. And that character was just an absolute rock. I mean, not only was she tough and beefy, but with like her auras and whatnot, she really reduced enemy spellcasters to kind of a joke. I mean, between the bonus to everybody's saving throw against their spells and then having damage from their spells on top of that, you know, and then the party also had people with counterspell, like, you know, they were like destroying liches and stuff like it was nothing, because at higher levels they just had so many tools to deal with that kind of stuff. And a large part of that was the Paladin. And then in the current campaign I'm running, she's playing an Oath of Conquest Paladin. And they're very, very different characters. She's not playing them the same, which is good to see. And already this character, again, just appears to be rock solid so far. So I think Paladins are excellent, even if you don't multi-class them. Disclaimer. And they're just a really solid class. So Oath of Devotion, I started with it because of all the Paladin oaths, it's the one that most represents to me that old school like 2nd edition Paladin where you had to be lawful good and you had different restrictions on what armor and weapons you could keep and stuff. You could only have like 10 magic items, I think it was, you know. And this one is the one that most kind of reflects that, like the heroic, self-sacrificing champion of righteousness that Paladins all used to have to be. And don't get me wrong, I really like that nowadays Paladins have a lot more options. They're not just these stereotypical Dudley Do-Right types, but I do kind of still like that old school Paladin as well, and this is the one that most closely resembles it. If you look at their tenets, they're honesty, courage, compassion, honor, and duty, and that really speaks to that old school type of Paladin, right? I don't necessarily think that the Oath of Devotion Paladin is the strongest overall. I have a common complaint with a lot of their abilities, which is they're very specific. They really, really excel at fighting things like fiends and undead a lot, and celestials. And they've got a lot of abilities for dealing with those kind of things. But if you're not fighting a lot of those, then some of your abilities just aren't really useful at all, which is really a shame to me. But it is what it is. And honestly, if I was going to be playing a Paladin in, say, like a Ravenloft campaign, and I wanted to, you know, maybe metagame a little bit, Oath of Devotion is the one to go with, in my opinion. They have a lot of really, really solid abilities if I know I'm going to be going up against those specific types of creatures. So, without further ado, we'll jump into their spell list and their abilities. I do think their spell list, much like some of their other abilities, is really hit or miss. Again, there's a lot of like very specific situational abilities, and that can be good, and it can also be bad. But as a quick note, I want to say, like, they get spells like Zone of Truth, for example, right? And Zone of Truth I don't think is a great spell, but I'm going to say that circumstantial combat spells, in my opinion, are much worse than circumstantial social spells. And the reason is because whether I used a certain spell in combat or not, especially a low-level spell, like a Bless or Protection from Evil and Good, those kind of things can help tip the scales in our advantage. But a lot of fights, we would have won them without them anyways, right? It takes a fight that was probably slightly skewed in the party's favor, and just skews it even further. And, you know, whether you cast Bless or whether you use that spell slot to smite somebody with, or whether you just didn't even use that spell slot, odds are party, under most circumstances, might have won that fight anyway. Now, it's not to say that there won't be tough fights where it's like, wow, we might have lost that if it wasn't for Bless. And that's fine too. I'm not trying to say that kind of stuff doesn't happen. I'm just saying, as a general rule, whether you cast one spell in combat or didn't use that spell in combat, usually isn't a game changer, especially for low-level spells. If you're getting into things like Force Cage or Wall of Force, that might be a different story. But having a specific social spell is often really, really nice, because if you either have the spell or don't, a lot of times not having the spell means you're just screwed. Like, you're just SOL, and there's nothing you can really do, right? Like, if you just really, really needed a way to be able to find out if somebody's lying to you, and you don't have a way of doing that, that kind of leaves you in a bad spot. Excuse me. I'm still slightly sick, but it was not the corona, apparently. I got tested, and it was negative. It's just the regular plague, not the 2020 plague. As far as their spells go, at level 3, you get Protection from Evil and Good and Sanctuary. And Sanctuary I really like, especially for a lot of situations where maybe you have to, like, protect the commoner, you know, type of thing. Or you have, like, protect the druid while he casts his ritual invocation, and, you know, you have to keep him safe for like 8 or 10 rounds of combat, fight everything off while he casts his spell and can't be interrupted. So a Sanctuary spell down on that guy before you get started, and it'll be a lot easier for you, let me tell you. Protection from Evil and Good, it is circumstantial, but there's a lot of creatures it affects. It affects, where's my list here? Aberrations, Celestials, Elementals, Fae, Fiends, and Undead. So while that is a specific group of creatures, it's also a lot of groups of creatures. So I don't think that it's necessarily a bad spell. My only complaint about it really is that one of the material components is a vial of holy water, which is consumed in the casting. And that's like 25 gold apiece. So if you're a low-level paladin, and you're trying to save up all your hard-earned gold so that you can buy yourself some nice, beautiful, shiny plate mail, that gets a little prohibitive when you're dishing out 25 gold on holy water all the time. But it's not a bad spell. I wouldn't say it's a great spell either, but, you know, it's not bad. And having it always prepared is kind of nice. Level 5, you get Lesser Restoration and Zone of Truth. Lesser Restoration is an excellent spell. I love that spell. Zone of Truth, like I said, it is pretty circumstantial. But, you know, sometimes you just really needed to know if that guy was telling you the truth or not. So, you might only use it once or twice in a campaign, but it can be okay tonight, and, you know, knowing that you have it ready, I guess. Level 9, you get Beacon of Hope and Dispel Magic. Obviously, Dispel Magic is a great spell. I'm not complaining about that one at all. Beacon of Hope is another one of these spells that I really, really want to like. And it's just kind of hard to do so, because if I'm using a 3rd level spell to make my other healing spells more effective, I could have just used that spell as a heal probably. And, you know, maybe that wouldn't have been quite as effective overall, but I'm not having to use like a spell just to buff my other spells. I do see a lot of potential in combination with an actual like dedicated party healer though. So maybe you have a druid and they want to cast like Spirits of Healing, right? And then you're like, wait, let me throw down my my Beacon of Hope first, and all of the healing will be maximized, right? So I think that there's some potential there. Maybe you have a Life Cleric and they throw down Beacon of Hope, and then you use like Aura of Vitality, and now you get maximum effectiveness out of that spell. But in general, having to like stack multiple people buffing or healing, it's just not great in my opinion. Level 13 though, you get Freedom of Movement and Guardian of Faith. Freedom of Movement is one of those spells that, like, as a 4th level spell slot, it kind of feels like really pricey. But then you get into one of these circumstances where you're wearing your beautiful shiny plate mail with your great sword, and you're just like, I'm just gonna smite this thing into the ground. And then you get caught in like a web spell or something, and you can't get free. There's nothing worse than being like a big, hard-hitting melee guy who can't get into melee. Just ask a barbarian when he wasted his rage because he got immobilized somehow after using it. You know? It sucks. So, having freedom of movement, always prepared, it is nice. There's nothing worse than just not being able to do anything on your turn. Guardian of Faith. Guardian of Faith is pretty nice as a guardian for when you're sleeping, I find. The fact that it lasts 8 hours makes it perfect for taking a long rest. It's not very mobile, so, it's not like you're going to be able to summon it and take it with you through the dungeon. It's usually best for when you're camping. My only real complaint here is that you're not getting it to his 13th level, and by then the party's wizard could have been casting Mordenkainen's Magnificent Mansion or something. You could be sleeping in a magical palace instead of sleeping outdoors with a sleeping bag and a bedroll with a Guardian of Faith to protect you. Sleep in a magical palace, I'm telling you, every time. But it's not bad. I mean, at the worst, your wizard could have cast Lehman's Tiny Hut. You could be sleeping in there, Come on, wizard. What are you doing, man? Have some self-respect. Level 17, you get Commune and Flame Strike. Commune is another one of these circumstantial spells. I don't think it's bad, but it's a 5th level spell slot. And, you don't have a lot of 5th level spells as a paladin. Come on. So it is pretty expensive, and I've seen multiple campaigns where no one ever cast a Commune spell ever, or a Contact Other Plane, or any of these. And so while I personally love those kind of spells, most people just don't really seem to care about them that much. And, fair enough. They're pretty circumstantial a lot of times. Then we have Flame Strike. Flame Strike is a spell that I absolutely hate. It's a 5th level spell that does the same damage as a fireball, but is basically worse in almost every possible way. And yeah, part of the damage is radiant and part of it is fire, but that just gives creatures 2 opportunities to try to resist it, in my opinion. It's not very good. I really just do not like it. My only argument in favor of it on a paladin is that you don't have a lot of good AoE damage as a paladin, but, I mean, if you're casting a spell that does the same damage as Fireball at your 17th level, and this is what you weren't meant to be an AoE class, just accept it, move on with your life. Or multi-class. Paladin Sorcerer, Paladin Warlock. Both of those can help you with that problem. As far as your channel divinity abilities, man, I'm having a hard time speaking too. You have Sacred Weapon and Turn the Unholy. Sacred Weapon is excellent in my opinion. As an action, you imbue one weapon that you are holding with positive energy using your channel divinity. For 1 minute, you add your charisma modifier to the attack rolls made with that weapon with a minimum bonus +1. It also emits light for 20 feet and then dim light for 20 feet beyond that. If it's not already magical, it counts as magical. If you get knocked out, though, or you drop the weapon, the effect ends, so don't get disarmed. But overall, just the fact that at level 3, I have a weapon that I can turn into magical and, also add my charisma bonus to my hit rolls, that's pretty good, in my opinion. There's nothing wrong with that. As I level up more, the fact that it can still stack with my weapon, it says if the weapon's not already magical, it becomes so for the duration, right? So I mean, you could have a +3 sword at high levels, and then still be adding your charisma roll to the attack roll if you use this ability. So the fact that it's nice when you're low level and don't have magic items, but it's not made redundant by getting high level and having good magic items. That's what I really like about this ability. It can see value for your entire campaign, your entire career as a paladin. It'll be good. Turn the Unholy. Basically, you just have the ability to turn fiends or undead. Each fiend or undead that can see or hear you within 30 feet of you must make a wisdom saving throw. If it fails, it's turned for 1 minute or until it takes damage. A turned creature must spend its turn trying to move away from you, etc., etc., etc. It's basically just like cleric ability, except that you can't destroy undead like clerics can as they get more powerful. Overall, I don't think it's bad, and it does, again, serve one useful purpose, which is that paladins in general are just not good at like fighting hordes of creatures. And this actually gives you the ability to deal with like hordes of undead, which isn't a bad ability at all, right? So, again, it's circumstantial. Fiends are undead. You know, it is what it is. You've got a lot of stuff for fighting fiends and undead, I guess. But it's not terrible. As far as your Aura of Devotion at level 7, you infernal creatures within 10 feet of you can't be charmed while you are conscious. And of course at 18th level it increases to 30 feet, just like all the paladin auras. Being immune to charm is pretty decent. I wish it applied to like even more conditions like charmed and frightened or something. But it's not bad. It's no match for Aura of Warding, for example, but it's not bad. Charm effects can be really dangerous and can really like turn the tide of a battle. So, you know, the fact that you don't have to worry about it is really nice. At level 15, you get Purity of Spirit. You are always under the effects of a protection from evil and good spell. So once again, we've already talked about protection from evil and good. It's not a bad spell. It applies to a decent swath of creatures, so that's good. They have disadvantage to hit you, and you are immune to their charm, frightened, and possessed abilities. My only complaint here really is that your aura is already making you immune to all charm abilities, so there is some redundancy there. Being frightened or possessed, like you've already got your aura to help you with those things. You have proficiency on wisdom and charisma saves as a paladin, which are the most likely ones you're going to have to worry about in either of those circumstances. So I feel like it's taking something you're already really good at and just making you even better. And that's not a bad thing by any means, but, you know, I might have liked something a little different. Who knows? But like I said, it's not a bad ability. At level 20, you get Holy Nimbus. This one, again, it can be decent for fighting hordes, but I do think it's a little underwhelming. It's a level 20 ability. So as an action, you can emanate an aura of sunlight for 1 minute. Bright light shines from you in a 30-foot radius, and dim light shines 30 feet beyond that. Whenever an enemy creature starts its turn in the bright light, it takes 10 radiant damage. In addition, for the duration, you have advantage on saving throws against spells cast by fiends or undead. Of course you do. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a long rest. Again, very specific to fiends and undead. So like I said, you're really good at fighting those kind of things. You're decent at fighting everything else. So, you know, it's not like it's bad by any means. I just wish that it was not quite so like heavily focused in this one area. A lot of your spells, a lot of your abilities kind of all are centered around this. But overall, it's still a pretty decent subclass. I really like the Sacred Weapon ability a lot. I think Purity Spirit's decent. Like I said, like always having disadvantage from those types of creatures attacking you. It is a decent number of creatures. If it was just fiends and undead, I'd probably be a lot more critical of it. But, you know, like aberrations, celestials, elementals, fae, fiends, undead, that is a decent list at this point, right? And at higher levels, you start fighting a lot of those kind of things. So them having disadvantage to hit you is pretty nice. Especially since you're probably going to have huge armor class as a paladin. It means that even things like powerful demons are going to struggle to hit you a lot of times, you know? So, you know, that's good. Fighting like high-level devils and stuff is not going to be that bad because they're going to have a hard time hitting you. I do wish that maybe they had some more general stuff. I feel like the spell list is, like I said, it's kind of hit or miss. You got some real standouts, but you've got some stuff on there that I just don't like much. But overall, it's a pretty strong class. And I really like the feel of it. I like that old school paladin type of mentality. And I think they're pretty good. But I don't know if it's going to be my next video. But in a future video, we'll be covering the Oath of Vengeance and the Oath of the Ancients. They'll both probably be coming up fairly shortly. And I feel like both of those are stronger in a lot of ways. So stay tuned for those. But anyways, that's my thoughts on the Oath of Devotion. I'm not going to bother with like all the like feats and racial choices and stuff like that. there are some really good ones. We might get into those more with Oath of Vengeance, especially. I think that there's some strong feats that fit really well there. In general, though, I'll say that it's hard to go wrong with Inspiring Leader on a Paladin, especially on an Oath of Devotion, where you're kind of playing that like protector-style character. And I think that there's a real case to be made there. I like Inspiring Leader a lot, and you are kind of that charismatic leader of the team type of guy. So I feel that one's worth mentioning at least. But anyways, those are my thoughts on it. Feel free to like, subscribe, assuming you actually like the video, of course. Hit the bell for notifications, you know, all the YouTube stuff. You guys know what you're doing by now, I'm sure. And most importantly, leave me your comments in the comment section, and I will see you next time.